You've lost your damn mind, Maya. You just stole a $3 million Ferrari. Charles Grayson's voice thundered through the hospital corridor like a judge's gavel cracking against the air. He stormed in, gray hair slicked back, jaw clenched tight, tailored suit flawless as always, except now, his composure was gone. In its place was fire, fury, and something colder, entitlement. Maya Williams stood frozen, wrists shackled behind her back, breath ragged, chest still heaving from the drive that might have saved a life but cost her everything else. Her dark blue scrubs were soaked with sweat, and Elena's faint traces of vomit. Her eyes, bloodshot from tears and fear, stayed locked on the double doors leading to the trauma room. Charles didn't notice her gaze. He didn't ask how the child was doing. His eyes, wild and sharp, were fixed solely on her. "My car," he shouted, slamming a palm against the wall beside him. "Do you have any idea what you've done to it?" Maya started, barely above a whisper. "You scratched the rear quarter panel, you blew out the suspension on the left side, and the front splitter. Do you know what carbon fiber like that costs?" Maya's mouth parted. She swallowed hard. She wasn't breathing, sir. There wasn't time. You had a dozen other options. Call security. Wait for the paramedics," he barked. "But no. You had to take my Ferrari as if it was yours to touch. You raced through the streets like a maniac, and now look at it." "I called 911, Maya said softly. "They said it would take 14 minutes. She wasn't going to make it that long." "That's not your call to make," he snapped, stepping closer, his finger stabbing the air in front of her. "You're a damn maid, Maya, a helper. You're not a doctor, you're not a mother, you're not family." The corridor fell into tense silence. The officer behind Maya shifted uncomfortably. A nurse behind the desk lowered her pen. Maya's voice trembled but didn't break. "She's 6, and she couldn't breathe." Charles scoffed. "What the hell do you know about responsibility, Maya? You just totaled a custom-engineered hypercar because what your emotions took over." "Sir," a voice cut in gently from behind the ER physician, clipboard in hand, his lab coat smudged with a trace of blood. Charles ignored him. "She'll be in surgery for days now, and for what? A carjacking charge? I should press charges tonight." The doctor cleared his throat, firmer now. "Mr. Grayson, your daughter's alive because of this woman." Charles finally turned toward him, as if noticing the doctor for the first time. "If she had arrived 2 or 3 minutes later," the doctor said calmly, "your daughter likely would have suffered permanent brain damage, or worse. Whoever drove her here, they did it just in time." The silence that followed was heavy. No gasps, no drama, just wait. Charles stared at the doctor, then back at Maya, but the fire in his face didn't cool. "She destroyed my car," he said flatly. "That was the only one of its kind on the East Coast. And that little girl," Maya said quietly, "is the only one of her kind in the world too." Charles said nothing. His lips pressed into a tight line. Without another word, he turned and disappeared behind the trauma doors where Elena lay. The officer behind Maya finally exhaled. We'll need your statement soon, ma'am." Maya nodded, not to him, but toward the door toward Elena. Her shoulders sagged as her knees trembled beneath her. Not from guilt, not from fear, but from relief. Elena was alive. That's what mattered, even if no one else saw it yet. If you were touched by Maya's quiet courage, give her a like and leave a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Who knows? Someone nearby might be watching with you. 3 days earlier, the Grayson estate was as quiet as a cathedral after midnight. Morning light filtered through 2-story windows, casting golden lines across polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It was the kind of house that made people whisper without knowing why. Too clean, too perfect, too hollow. Maya Williams moved quietly through the main hallway, carrying a laundry basket filled with Elena's dresses, all ironed, color-coded, folded. She had learned the order: whites on top, pastels in the middle, darks on the bottom. The housekeeper before her had been fired for getting it wrong. That woman had lasted 2 months. Maya had survived nearly 4 years. She passed the grand piano untouched since Mrs. Grayson's funeral and headed toward the back staircase. Her sneakers made no sound on the rug. Her hands practiced in silence. That was the rule of the house. Be present but invisible, efficient, not emotional, valuable, not vocal. Elena. She heard from upstairs a high, sweet call. The little girl's voice carried like a bell. "Where's my pink bunny dress?" Maya smiled and called back. "Coming right up, Miss Sunshine." Elena Grayson was the only soul in the house who saw Maya as more than background. At 6 years old, she had the open heart of a child untouched by the filters of wealth and power. When Maya braided her hair, Elena would ask her to sing. When Maya cleaned her room, Elena followed her around like a shadow. It wasn't supposed to be that way. Staff weren't encouraged to form attachments. But some bonds grow in the silence between bedtime stories and emergency asthma attacks, between two lives that have both known sudden loss. Elena had lost her mother to a rare seizure disorder just before her 5th birthday. Maya had lost hers to a heart attack in a public hospital waiting room, where no one came fast enough. Both losses had occurred in silence, unspoken, unhealed. That morning, Maya had arrived earlier than usual. Something in her gut told her to. Call it instinct. Or maybe it was the way Elena had looked the night before, paler than usual, slower to smile, her energy muted. No one else noticed. Not the nannies, who rotated in shifts. Not Mr. Grayson, who was constantly on the phone, walking through the house like a man with no time for children or grief. Maya noticed. She always noticed. Downstairs in the kitchen, the chef had left Elena's breakfast tray untouched. Organic Greek yogurt, steel, cut oats, half a grapefruit cut without sugar, by request. Maya added a single slice of cinnamon toast with butter and sugar. She knew it wasn't in the dietary plan. She also knew it was Elena's favorite. A comfort. She brought the tray upstairs. "Elena, breakfast." The girl didn't respond. Maya pushed the door open gently. The lights were off, curtains drawn, the air still. Elena lay curled on the edge of the bed, arms wrapped around the pink bunny dress like a security blanket. Her skin looked gray, lips pale, forehead damp with sweat. "Elena?" Maya's voice sharpened. She set the tray down, crossed the room in seconds. Elena opened her eyes, blinked slowly. "Mama Maya, my tummy hurts." Her voice was faint. Maya crouched down and felt her forehead burning. "You're okay, baby," she whispered. "Let's get you cooled down." She scooped the girl into her arms and carried her into the adjoining bathroom, wet a cloth, dabbed her face. The child shivered, then groaned, her body going rigid. Then her eyes rolled back. "Elena." No answer. "Elena, baby, stay with me." Maya's voice trembled. She laid the girl on the cool bathroom tiles, tilted her head gently, checked her airway. No movement. The panic was instant and full. Maya ran back to the hallway and pressed the wall intercom. Nothing. The maintenance crew had been working on the house's internal systems all week. The panel was unlit. Dead. She ran back to the bedroom, grabbed her cell from her tote bag, battery dead. She cursed under her breath, grabbed the landline. The dispatcher answered quickly. Maya explained. The voice on the other end was calm but slow. "Ma'am, emergency units are 10 to 14 minutes out. Stay on the line." 14 minutes. She looked down at Elena again. Her tiny chest barely moved. Her skin now bluish near the lips. 14 minutes was too long. Maya thought fast. The staff SUV was parked at the back, but the keys were kept in the guard booth and there was no time to search. She remembered the garage. The Ferrari, always parked in the center like a sculpture on display. Mr. Grayson's crown jewel, untouched by staff. She ran, down the stairs, through the corridor, out to the garage. The doors opened automatically with her ID swipe. The car sat there, low, red, almost humming with threat. The key fob glinted under the glass. She smashed the case with a fire extinguisher. The alarm didn't go off. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the key, opened the door, ran back, picked up Elena, wrapped her in a blanket, carried her to the car. "Hold on, baby," she whispered as she secured the girl in the passenger seat. "Don't you dare leave me." She started the engine. The growl of the Ferrari split the silence of the Grayson estate. Maya punched the accelerator and didn't look back. Through gates, through traffic, through fear. She didn't drive that car like a thief. She drove it like a mother. The Ferrari tore through the leafy avenues of West Haven like a streak of red lightning, its engine screaming, tires gripping the pavement with every turn. Maya gripped the steering wheel with both hands, her knuckles white, eyes darting between the road ahead and the pale, motionless child in the passenger seat. "Stay with me, baby. Please, Elena, just hold on," she whispered, her voice thick with panic and prayer. Elena's head lolled to the side, her chest rising so faintly it was nearly imperceptible. Maya reached out with one hand at a red light, pressing 2 fingers gently to the girl's neck. A pulse weak, fluttering but there. The light was still red. Maya looked both ways. Empty streets, suburban stillness. Then, without another second of hesitation, she slammed the gas. The tires squealed. Horns blared behind her. "Come on, come on, come on," she muttered. Her foot stayed heavy on the accelerator as the trees blurred by. Each second felt stolen, each intersection a gamble. Somewhere behind her, she heard its sirens. She didn't look back. They must have picked her up on traffic cameras. The Ferrari was too distinct, too loud, too fast not to draw attention. But she couldn't stop now. She wouldn't, not until Elena was safe. A squad car appeared in the rearview mirror, siren lights flashing. "Damit," Maya he said. She flicked on her emergency flashers and waved one hand out the window, signaling toward the hospital exit a mile ahead. She wasn't trying to flee. She was trying to save. Another red light. She didn't brake. The car bounced violently over a dip in the road, scraping the undercarriage as it landed. Elena shifted in her seatbelt. Maya reached across instinctively, adjusting the girl's head. "I've got you, sweet girl. Just hang on." The hospital's white and blue sign finally came into view. St. Mary's Regional Medical Center. Emergency entrance, too. Maya's breath caught. Her chest ached with tension. Her eyes burned from holding back tears. But the worst part, the most agonizing weight pressing on her soul, was the fear that none of this would matter. That she might pull up to the ER, jump out screaming, and find out she was already too late. The Ferrari roared up the ramp toward the emergency lane. Orderlies leapt back in shock as the car skidded to a halt just inches from the sliding glass doors. A nurse on smoke break dropped her coffee cup and ran. Maya didn't even put the car in park. She jumped out, tore open the passenger door, and pulled Elena into her arms. "Help! She's not breathing. Help!" Her voice cracked with urgency, echoing across the asphalt. The ER doors slid open, and a team of nurses and a doctor rushed out with a gurney. "What happened?" one shouted. "She just collapsed, seizure, maybe I didn't know what else to do." They took the child from her arms and laid her flat. An oxygen mask went over Elena's face, while someone began chest compressions. Another nurse jabbed a needle into her tiny arm. Orders flew like arrows. "Get a line in. Push 0.1 of epi. We're losing her." Maya stood frozen for a split second, staring as Elena's small body was wheeled away, surrounded by white coats and panic. Then hands grabbed her shoulders. "Ma'am, step back." A police officer, young, pale, clearly rattled. "We need to talk to you right now. You just ran 5 red lights in a stolen car." Maya turned slowly. Her eyes didn't show fear, only exhaustion. "I had no choice," she said. "Put your hands where I can see them." She obeyed. "I didn't steal the car," she said. "I saved a child." The officer nodded stiffly, hand already on his radio. "We'll sort that out. For now, you're being detained." Maya didn't fight. She let the cuffs wrap around her wrists. The weight of the moment was heavier than steel. As the officer walked her back toward the squad car, Maya looked over her shoulder, one last time, toward the doors that had swallowed up Elena. And then the world slowed down. From the hospital doors stepped a woman, elderly, dressed in scrubs, her curly gray hair tucked beneath a surgical cap. Her eyes locked on Maya's face, not with suspicion, but with something older, something deeper. Recognition. Empathy. She said nothing. But she didn't look away. Maya didn't know her. But in that instant, it didn't matter. The woman saw her, not the cuffs, not the car, not the color of her skin. She saw what no one else had. A person who had acted with love. A person who had risked everything because no one else had listened. The squad car door shut behind her. The engine started. And still, Maya said nothing. There was nothing to say. She had done the unthinkable. She had broken the rules of class, of ownership, of silence. And now, the cost of that choice had begun. The walls were bare and off-white. the kind of color meant to feel neutral but instead felt sterile, lifeless. The fluorescent light above flickered every few seconds, buzzing faintly like a dying insect. Maya sat alone at the metal table in the center of the small room, wrists uncuffed now but still sore from the pressure. She hadn't spoken much since arriving at the precinct. The officers had offered her water. She declined. She wasn't thirsty. Her stomach was a tight knot of anxiety, her mind circling around one question: was Elena still alive? The door creaked open. A woman in her late 50s stepped in. Detective Sarah Coleman. Salt and pepper hair pulled into a low bun, plain slacks, button-down shirt. Her face was lined not with age, but with experience. She closed the door quietly and placed a file on the table. No dramatics, no immediate questions. She just sat down across from Maya and looked at her for a long moment. "You work for Charles Grayson?" she finally asked. Maya nodded. "Yes, Mom. 4 years. Your role?" "Housekeeping, mostly. But She paused, swallowed hard. "I also look after his daughter, Elena." Detective Coleman flipped open the file. "The report says you took his Ferrari without permission. Drove it at high speeds through multiple red lights. Endangered traffic. Led to a police chase. All true?" Maya inhaled deeply. "Yes, but I didn't do it to flee. I did it to get Elena to the hospital." She collapsed. She wasn't breathing. "Why not wait for paramedics?" "I called. They said 14 minutes. She was turning blue, Detective. I couldn't wait." Coleman leaned back. Her face betrayed nothing. "You understand, Miss Williams, that what you did was technically grand theft auto, not to mention reckless endangerment." "I know," Maya said quietly, "but I'd do it again." A silence settled between them. Then Coleman said, "Let me tell you what else I know. The ER doctor on duty said if the girl had arrived any later, she might have died. Said whoever drove her in made the right call." Maya blinked hard, tears threatening. Is she okay?" "She's stable. Sedated. The swelling in her brain's gone down. They're optimistic." Maya's hands covered her mouth. Relief surged through her like electricity, so strong it made her dizzy. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the cold metal table, eyes brimming. Coleman gave her a moment. "Tell me exactly what happened that morning," she said gently. "Start from the beginning." Maya told her everything: the breakfast tray, the broken intercom, the dead phone battery, the panicked decision to run to the garage. Her voice wavered but never broke. She told it like it had happened just minutes ago, every moment still etched into her muscles. Coleman listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, the detective closed the file slowly and folded her hands. "Here's what I think," she said. "I think you broke the law, but I also think you saved a life. Which puts us in a complicated place." Maya looked up. "Are you going to charge me?" "I don't know yet. That depends on a few things. Mr. Grayson hasn't decided if he wants to press charges." At the sound of his name, Maya's body stiffened. "He didn't even ask about her when he got to the hospital," she said bitterly. "He was screaming about his damn car. That's all he cared about." Coleman didn't respond to that. Instead, she stood, gathering the file. "For now, you're being released, on the condition that you remain available for further questioning." Maya blinked. "Released? Yeah, we're not the enemy here, Maya. I've seen real criminals. You don't fit that picture." The door opened, and another officer gestured for her to follow. As Maya stepped out into the hallway, the light felt harsher, the voices louder. She wasn't free, not really. But for the first time in hours, she could breathe. Outside the precinct, the sky was beginning to turn gray with dusk. A cool breeze blew across her face, and she pulled her arms tightly around herself. A taxi waited at the curb, arranged by the officer who had booked her. She climbed in silently. As the car pulled away, Maya's thoughts drifted not to the courtroom, or the possible charges, or even Charles Grayson's rage. She thought only of Elena, of the soft curl of her fingers when she slept, of the laughter that filled the quiet spaces of that cold mansion, of the little girl who called her Mama Maya, even when no one else thought she deserved a title. Maya didn't know what would come next, but she knew this. She had not acted out of rebellion or recklessness. She had acted out of love, out of desperation, and if she had to, she would do it again. Even if the world didn't understand, even if justice like that car came with a price tag she could never afford. Back at the Grayson estate, silence had never felt so loud. Charles stood in his private study, a glass of neat bourbon in one hand, staring out the massive arched window that overlooked the manicured lawn. The Ferrari hadn't been returned yet. The garage felt empty without it, almost accusing, but it wasn't the missing car that twisted his gut. It was the memory of Maya's eyes in that hospital hallway filled with something that haunted him more than guilt. Conviction. Charles, a voice called gently from behind. It was Carla, the family's legal counsel and longtime friend. She stepped into the room, papers in hand. "We need to talk about this, before it escalates. I'm already being eaten alive on social media," Charles muttered, not turning. "Someone at the hospital recorded the whole thing, me shouting at her. The cuffs, the car, it's everywhere." "She's not pressing charges," Carla said. Charles turned sharply. "She's not?" "No," Carla replied. "Maya refused to file anything, even with you screaming at her like a madman. Even after you tried to have her arrested, she told the police she didn't want to cause trouble, said she understood you were scared." He scoffed. "I was furious." "You were exposed," Carla corrected. "There's a difference." Charles looked away, jaw tight. "Charles, listen," Carla said, walking over and placing the documents on the desk. "You could still push this. Sue her for damages. Go after her for the car, but you're going to lose more than you win." He picked up the papers but didn't read them. "She stole from me. She saved your daughter's life," Carla countered, her tone sharp but steady. "And the world knows it. The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" He didn't answer. Across town, Maya sat on the worn sofa in her small apartment, arms wrapped around herself as the evening news flickered on the television. Her name was being mentioned again, along with blurry footage from the hospital. Her face appeared beside the headline, "Hero or Thief, Maid's Daring Drive Saves Grayson Heiress." She winced. It wasn't a title she wanted. There was a knock at the door. Maya hesitated, heart pounding. Then she opened it. Detective Coleman stood there, a paper bag in one hand. "I brought food. Figured you haven't eaten." Maya stepped aside wordlessly, letting her in. The detective placed the bag on the counter, then looked around the small space. It was clean, lived in, modest. A framed photo of a younger Maya with her late mother sat near a bookshelf filled with library novels. "You live alone?" Coleman asked. "Yes. My mother passed 2 years ago. Stroke." Coleman nodded slowly. "I did some digging. You were on a nursing track at community college before she got sick." Maya sat down, a little guarded now. "Why are you here?" The detective pulled out 2 plastic containers from the bag. "Because I think this isn't over. And because I've been doing this job a long time. I know when someone's story hasn't been fully told." Maya blinked. "You believe me?" "I know you," Coleman said. "I grew up in a neighborhood like this. I've seen 100 women just like you, smart, steady, the backbone of everyone else's comfort. And I know what happens when people like Charles Grayson decide you're disposable." Maya looked away, her voice tight. "I didn't do it to make a statement. I just didn't want her to die. And that," Coleman said, "is exactly why people are listening to you." Maya shook her head. "No one cares about maids. Not really." The detective smiled faintly. "They do when one of them has more courage than a room full of billionaires." Back at the Grayson estate, Charles paced the length of his study. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that hour. His PR team, his investors, his daughter's godmother, all of them telling him the same thing. Do something. He poured another drink. Then he walked over to his desk and picked up the phone. "Get me the hospital," he said. An hour later, he stood outside Elena's room, watching through the glass. She was asleep, monitors beeping steadily, her chest rising and falling like a small wave. Her hand was curled around the edge of the blanket just like her mother used to do. He couldn't hear her voice, but he heard Maya's echoing from the past. She wasn't breathing. For the first time in a long time, he felt unsure of himself. Not in business, not in negotiations, but in something deeper. In fatherhood. In humanity. He stepped back, pulled out his phone, and typed a message. To Maya, just 5 words. "Can we talk, Charles?" He stared at the screen for a long time before pressing send. Maya stared at her phone for nearly a full minute before she let herself breathe. Charles's text glowed on the screen, almost surreal in its brevity. "Can we talk? Charles." She didn't respond right away. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because after everything, she wasn't sure if she wanted to hear his voice again. And yet, something in her chest urged her to answer. Not for him, not for closure, for Elena. So she typed, "Where?" The reply came back quickly. "Hospital cafeteria. 11 a.m. tomorrow." Maya's fingers hovered over her screen, considering all the ways she could say no. But at 11:01 the next morning, she stepped into the cafeteria at St. Mary's, wearing a simple gray blouse and jeans. Her hair was pulled back, eyes guarded. She spotted him immediately sitting at a corner table by the window, suit crisp, tie loosened just slightly. He didn't look like a man who had come to apologize. He looked like a man preparing for a negotiation. "Maya," Charles said, standing as she approached. He gestured to the seat across from him. She didn't return the greeting, just sat, folded her arms, waited. Charles cleared his throat. "First, I want to say thank you for what you did for Elena. I realize now, it was brave and selfless." Maya didn't speak. Her silence was loud. He continued, "I know I reacted poorly. At the hospital, I was shocked, furious, confused. I said things I shouldn't have. That's one way to put it," she replied softly. Charles's jaw tightened. "I let the car cloud my judgment. It wasn't about the car. It was about control, about being blindsided." "You were scared," Maya said, voice still calm. "But instead of checking on your daughter, you yelled at me in front of a crowd, called me a maid, said I wasn't family." He looked away for a beat, ashamed. "I know," he admitted. "That was unforgivable." "No," Maya said. "It was very forgivable, but not forgettable." Charles looked back at her, something unspoken rising in his throat. "I came today," he said carefully, "because I need your help, with Elena." That, she hadn't expected. "I thought you'd fire me," she said, surprised. "I probably should have," he admitted with a bitter smile. "My lawyers told me to. My PR team begged me to. But when I went to see Elena last night, she was still unconscious. And even then, she whispered your name." Maya felt something ache in her chest. "I don't know how to be enough for her, Maya," Charles confessed. "Not since Rachel died. I've thrown money at every solution, every problem, but I don't know how to give her what she needs." Maya took a breath. "She needs presence, not wealth. She needs softness, someone to listen, someone who sees her, even when she's not shining." "I don't know how to be that," he whispered. "But I do," Maya said. They sat there in the sunlight filtering through the hospital window. For the first time since the chaos began, the air between them wasn't thick with accusation but with something else, an uneasy alliance. "I'm not coming back for the paycheck," Maya said firmly. "If I stay, it's for her, not you. I won't pretend nothing happened, and I won't be invisible anymore." Charles nodded slowly. "Fair. And if I stay," she continued, "I want things changed. For the staff. No more silence. No more fear." His brows rose. "You're making demands now?" "No," Maya said with a quiet smile. "I'm setting terms." Charles chuckled just once, short and sharp, but there was no malice in it. "You've got guts, Maya Williams." "No," she replied. "I've got boundaries." The conversation shifted. He told her what the doctors said, that Elena would be under observation for another week, that she'd need physical therapy, that she'd likely recover fully, thanks to Maya's quick action. "I don't know how to repay you," Charles said finally. "You don't," she said. "You just raise your daughter better than you were raised. That's the only payment that matters." He didn't answer, but he nodded. As Maya stood to leave, Charles called after her. "Will you visit her today?" "I already have," she said. "I sang her the lullaby." He blinked. She smiled in her sleep. "That's why I came." And with that, she turned and walked away, not with anger, not with pride, but with quiet power. Because sometimes, justice isn't loud. It's not a courtroom verdict or a social media campaign. Sometimes, justice is a woman who was once overlooked, walking away on her own terms, with nothing in her hands but everything in her heart. The next morning, the Grayson estate sat bathed in early light, but inside, it was far from calm. Maya stepped through the front doors not as a maid, but as something more undefined, an essential presence, yet still not fully acknowledged. Her ID badge still worked. No one had disabled it, and when the head butler passed her in the hallway, he simply nodded, then turned away like nothing had changed. But everything had. Maya carried a paper bag in one hand, cinnamon toast, and a tiny apple juice box for Elena. She climbed the stairs slowly, conscious of every creak and shadow. As she approached the child's room, she heard soft humming, then a voice small and raspy. "Mama Maya?" Maya pushed open the door gently. Elena sat propped up in bed, surrounded by pillows, a heart monitor beeping softly behind her. Her cheeks had more color today, her curls slightly tousled. She looked tired but alive. So alive. "Hey, sunshine," Maya said, setting the bag down on the side table. "Guess what I brought?" Elena's eyes lit up. "Cinnamon toast." "You bet." Elena giggled weakly as Maya tore the toast into smaller pieces and helped her hold the plate. She chewed slowly, her hands shaky, but her smile was bright. Between bites, she whispered, "You were in my dream. You saved me with a red rocket car." Maya's throat tightened. "That's almost exactly what happened." "Did Daddy say sorry?" Elena asked, her voice hesitant. Maya hesitated, then replied carefully, "He's trying, sweet girl. Grown-ups aren't always good at saying sorry with words, but sometimes they try with actions." Elena nodded solemnly, like she understood more than a 6-year-old should. Later that day, Maya sat alone on the back patio, watching gardeners trim hedges in the distance. The scent of roses floated on the breeze, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe things might shift. That justice had not only survived but begun to bloom. But the calm didn't last. She heard footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate. It was Olivia Marston, Charles's chief advisor and longtime confidant. Immaculately dressed in a navy blazer and matching slacks, she always moved like she was 5 steps ahead of everyone else. "Maya," Olivia said coolly. "Olivia," Maya responded, her tone neutral. "I hear you've been reinstated." "I never left," Maya replied. Olivia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We need to talk. Privately." Maya gestured to the chair across from her. Olivia didn't sit. "There are whispers," Olivia began. "From the board. From the Grayson family's trustees. Some believe your return sends the wrong message." Maya met her gaze steadily. "You mean the message that people with no power can still be right? You acted outside protocol. Took a car you weren't authorized to drive. That alone opens the family up to liability. I acted to save a child's life." "I don't disagree," Olivia said smoothly. "But let me be blunt. Not everyone in Charles's circle supports this new arrangement. You're not just a housekeeper anymore. You're a symbol. And symbols make people uncomfortable." Maya's jaw tightened. "Is this a warning?" "It's a courtesy," Olivia said. "A reminder that the higher you rise, the harder they'll try to knock you down. Then let them try." Olivia finally sat, her posture flawless. "You have power now, Maya. Don't waste it on emotional retaliation. If you're wise, you'll keep your head down and take the win." "This isn't a win," Maya said softly. "It's a beginning." Olivia studied her. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I have to believe it. For Elena. For every staff member in this house who's been silenced." Olivia said nothing, but her silence wasn't agreement, it was calculation. As she rose to leave, Maya called after her. "Do you even like Charles?" Olivia paused, turned back. "I respect him, and I protect the legacy. That's what I've always done." Maya nodded. "Then maybe it's time someone else protected the people inside it." That night, Maya visited the servants' wing, a part of the house Charles had likely never stepped foot in. She knocked on doors, spoke softly to the cooks, the maids, the drivers. She listened. Stories flowed out in whispers. Overlooked injuries, dismissed complaints, paychecks shorted, dignity chipped away over time. And for the first time, Maya spoke back. "We're not just staff," she told them. "We are the heart of this house, and I don't care who hears me say it." The next day, a new staff meeting was called by Maya, not Charles. And when he found out, he didn't interrupt. He stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, watching as Maya outlined a new code of conduct for the household. Dignity, fairness, protection. Olivia stood beside him, her face unreadable. She's forcing your hand, she murmured. No, Charles said quietly. She's forcing my eyes open. And for the first time in years, the Grayson estate pulsed with something other than perfection. It pulsed with truth. News vans lined the edge of the Grayson estate. They didn't breach the gates, but their presence was undeniable, antennas raised, lenses pointed, waiting for something more dramatic than a statement. Charles Grayson had become a trending name for reasons that once would have made his PR team rejoice. Not this time. This time, he wasn't on the cover of a business magazine. He was the center of a storm he never saw coming, one set off by a woman he once dismissed as invisible. Inside the estate, Maya stood in Elena's room braiding the girl's hair, humming a tune that once echoed in her own mother's kitchen. Elena leaned against her without words, comforted by the rhythm of Maya's hands. Just as Maya was finishing the last strand, the nurse walked in with a clipboard. "Doctor says you're ready for another walk today, sweetheart," she said to Elena. The little girl nodded shyly. "Can Mama Maya come with me?" Maya smiled softly. Always. Downstairs, Charles was on the phone with his attorneys, pacing the length of the sunlit library. "No, I don't want to go on television," he said sharply. "We're not doing damage control through spin. That's not how we fix this." He hung up before they could argue. His fingers pinched the bridge of his nose. For the first time in his life, Charles Grayson wasn't looking for a way out, he was looking for a way forward. When Maya came down later with Elena, Charles was in the foyer. He straightened his shoulders instinctively, like a boy caught doing something wrong. His eyes fell on his daughter first. She looked stronger today. A small but vital sign of recovery. "Hey, Peanut," he said gently. Elena grinned. "Hi, Daddy." Then her eyes flicked between him and Maya. "Are you friends again?" Maya laughed softly, but Charles took a breath before responding. "We're working on it." Elena seemed satisfied with that. After sending Elena off with the nurse, Charles turned to Maya. "Can we walk?" Maya nodded, and together they stepped out into the garden. "I've been reading the letters," Charles began, hands tucked into his pockets. "From the public, dozens, hundreds even. Most of them support you." She said nothing. One woman from Michigan said she raised 5 kids on a housekeeper's salary. She said you reminded her of herself, said you gave her hope. Maya looked up. "It's not just about me." "I know," he said, "but you're the reason they're paying attention." They walked in silence past the fountain, the sound of water filling the gaps between words. "I've started a fund," Charles said. "It's for domestic workers. Legal support, emergency grants, health care. It'll be named after Rachel." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Not after me?" He smiled. "I thought about it. But something tells me you wouldn't want that." "You're right," she replied. "Rachel was kind. She saw me. Naming it after her is right." Charles hesitated. "There's something else." Maya stopped walking. "I'd like to offer you a new role," he said. "Director of Household Advocacy. A real position. You'd oversee staff, wellness, training, fair treatment. Not just here. Across all our properties." Maya's heart pounded. She hadn't expected that. "I'm not a corporate figure," she said. "You're not. You're better," he replied. "You have something I lost years ago. A conscience." Maya folded her arms, considering. "And what happens when I say no? Then you keep doing what you're doing, and I'll still respect you. But if you say yes, you'd have real power, real change." She looked toward the estate, where sunlight bounced off tall windows and polished glass. For so long, this place had felt like a gilded cage. But maybe, just maybe, it could become something else. "I'll think about it," she said. Charles nodded. "That's all I ask." Later that afternoon, Maya visited the staff lounge. It had never been much, just a few chairs, a coffee machine, and faded magazines. But today, it buzzed with energy. People were talking. Not in whispers, but openly. "You really spoke up?" one of the younger maids asked her. "I did," Maya replied. "And he listened?" "Not right away, but eventually, yes." An older groundskeeper leaned in. "So what now?" "Now," Maya said firmly, "we watch, we speak, we protect each other. No one gets left alone again." A silence followed. Then a slow, soft clap began from a cook near the back. Others joined in, until the room filled with the sound of quiet applause. Not grand, not loud, but honest. Maya didn't cry, but her heart did. That evening, Maya sat beside Elena's bed, reading a story about a lioness who fought off a thunderstorm to protect her cubs. The girl's eyelids fluttered, her hand wrapped gently around Maya's fingers. Before falling asleep, Elena mumbled, "You're not a maid anymore." Maya brushed her hair back. "No, baby, I'm something new." Elena's breathing slowed, and outside, for the first time in weeks, the winds over the estate were calm. A month passed. The story that had once shaken the Grayson estate began to fade from the headlines, replaced by newer scandals, louder headlines, fresher outrage, but not in the hearts of those it had touched. Maya Williams's name had quietly taken root in places she would never visit, in churches, in union halls, in community centers where women passed it on like a seed of courage. On a brisk morning in October, Maya stood in front of the Charles and Rachel Grayson Foundation for Domestic Workers, watching volunteers hang a banner above the door. The name was printed in gold against deep navy blue, and underneath it, in smaller letters, a phrase that Maya had chosen herself: "Dignity is not a privilege, it's a right." The ribbon-cutting ceremony was modest. No celebrity endorsements, no orchestras or television crews. Just Maya, Charles, Elena, and a handful of former and current domestic workers, most of them women, some with silver streaks in their hair, all with fire in their eyes. Elena clung to Maya's hand as the scissors were passed to her. "Can I do it?" the girl whispered. "Of course," Maya smiled. Elena sliced the ribbon with all the might a 6-year-old could muster, then raised the scissors high like a knight with a sword. The crowd laughed and clapped. Afterward, Maya gave a short speech. She didn't read from a paper. Her voice was steady, quiet, powerful. "I was never meant to be anything more than a shadow in someone else's house," she said. "But a moment came when I had to choose between obedience and what was right. I didn't save a child to be a hero. I did it because I loved her. And if loving someone makes you disobedient, then maybe obedience was never the point." Applause rose, not thunderous, but deep and sustained. Charles stood behind her, his posture more humble than usual. He didn't speak publicly that day. He didn't need to. His presence beside Maya was statement enough. Later, after the crowd had thinned and the sun began to drop behind the buildings, Maya walked alone through the foundation's first floor. It smelled of fresh paint and new purpose. One hallway was lined with portraits, black and white photos of women who had worked their whole lives in the shadows. Their names were printed in silver below their faces: Hattie, Rosalind, Maria, Claudine. Maya reached the end of the hall and stopped. There, framed in the center, was her own photo taken candidly one afternoon by a volunteer. In it, she wasn't posing. She was kneeling beside Elena, tying the girl's shoe, her face turned slightly in profile, expression focused, strong. Below the picture was a small plaque that read, "Maya Williams." She drove for justice. She stared at it for a long moment, not out of pride, but out of quiet reckoning. This wasn't how she ever imagined being remembered. A voice broke her reverie. "You deserve to be up there," said Detective Coleman, appearing in the hallway with her usual calm presence. She wore a blazer over jeans and held a file tucked under her arm. "You changed more than you know." Maya gave her a soft smile. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Coleman nodded. "But you were the one behind the wheel." Maya chuckled. "Funny, I used to hate driving." Coleman handed her the file. "Thought you'd want to see this. It's from the case review board." Maya opened it carefully, her eyes scanning the first page. The charges against her officially dismissed. The reason? Action justified under medical duress and moral imperative. No further inquiry recommended. She exhaled, not realizing she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "Thank you," she whispered. Coleman shrugged. "Just doing my job." "Oh, no," Maya said, eyes meeting hers. "You did more than that." Outside, autumn leaves began to fall gently across the courtyard, swirling in quiet patterns. Elena came running toward her, jacket half-zipped, a new staff member jogging behind her, breathless. "Mama Maya, look." Elena held out a crayon drawing stick figures holding hands in front of a house labeled home. Maya knelt, taking the drawing. "Who's this next to me?" "You," Elena grinned, "and Daddy, and me, and the others." She pointed at the stick figures representing the staff, each one smiling. arms wide. "It's all of us," she said. "We're a family now, right?" Maya felt tears prick her eyes. She nodded. "Yes, baby, we are." As the sun dipped low and laughter drifted across the grounds, Maya stood tall, the drawing in one hand, the future in the other. She had been a maid, a caretaker, a protector, a voice. And now, without fame, without riches, she had become something greater. A symbol, but most of all, a reminder that justice, no matter how delayed, can still arrive. And when it doesn't always wear a robe or carry a gavel. Sometimes, it wears worn shoes, hums lullabies, and drives a Ferrari through every red light between silence and salvation. It was late afternoon when Maya finally took a moment for herself. She slipped out of the Foundation's new offices and walked to the edge of the estate's gardens, where the gravel path led to a small gazebo overlooking a quiet pond. The air had a crisp edge of autumn, the kind that makes colors sharpen and thoughts settle into clarity. She sat on the wooden bench inside the gazebo and closed her eyes, letting the gentle breeze calm the hum in her chest. Behind her, the soft rustle of footsteps. She opened her eyes to see Charles approaching, unhurried, hands clasped behind his back. He paused at the entrance to the gazebo, watching her for a long moment. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded without turning. "I'm good." He settled beside her, careful not to crowd the bench. They sat in silence, looking out over the water where gold and red leaves floated. Eventually, Charles spoke again. "I heard from the Foundation's attorney today. We've received inquiries from 3 other estates, similar households, and they want to speak with you. About training, policy, conflict resolution, about how you did what you did." Maya felt a flicker of something pride, surprise, but said nothing. Charles continued. "They want to know how they can do it differently, how they can listen, how they can care." His voice softened. "It's because of you." Maya turned to him, guitar strings in her gaze. "I didn't do anything except what felt human." I know," he whispered. "That's what makes it extraordinary." She looked out across the still surface of the pond. A single leaf drifted from a branch and landed with barely a ripple. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Charles said, "except for your partnership, as our policy advisor, not just for the Foundation, but for all our properties worldwide. You'd help rewrite manuals, train managers, lead panels, spread dignity the way you did here." He reached into his coat pocket and produced a leather notebook. "I'd like you to fill this with your thoughts, ideas, changes, stories, and I want to make sure you have a voice, not just a seat at the table." Maya felt everything shift beneath that simple paper. She reached out, her fingers brushing the notebook's spine. She closed her eyes and remembered all the places she had been invisible, the times she lowered her head, the moments she swallowed a word to keep peace. None of that mattered anymore. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to Charles. "I'm afraid." He nodded, his expression solemn. "So am I. Afraid I'll be tokenized," she said. "Afraid I'll fail. Afraid the world will remind me I'm still the help." "You won't be," he said. "Not on my watch." She smiled, small, fragile, but real. "All right, I'll do it." He smiled back, but it was a careful half-smile, a promise more than relief. They sat together as the sun slipped behind the trees, until light gave way to dusk's peace. The following day, Maya found herself standing before a small group in a warm-lit conference hall, nestled within the Foundation's new annex. The room was filled with staff from other households and non-profit organizations, headmaids, butlers, nannies, estate managers, labor activists, many of them faces she recognized from donated photographs on the Foundation walls, all of them looking toward her as their appointed leader. She cleared her throat, glanced at the leather notebook opened on the podium, and remembered the ripple that leaf made, the simplicity of gentle change, the resistance necessary to shift a tidal wave. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and gentle. "Today, we're here because someone had to speak up. Someone had to risk consequences so that a child might live, and so a household might remember that every worker is human." She paused, letting her words settle. "Today, I'm not going to tell you how to obey. I'm going to tell you how to carry your respect." Her eyes swept across the room. "Because that's how you make the ripple into a wave." Charles slipped in gently behind her, not to interrupt but to stand as witness. He let her voice guide the room. For the next hour, Maya led the discussion. She invited stories of unfair reprimands, of overlooked injuries, of nights spent cleaning tears in private because no one had noticed they were crying. But she also asked for triumphs of small reforms made in silence, of managers asked to apologize, of dignity reclaimed through simple respect. When the session ended, the applause wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was rooted in something quiet and lasting. Afterward, as people filtered out, a woman approached Maya, her suit pin marked with the logo of a private estate far from the city. She offered her hand. "Thank you," the woman said. "You've started something I've been afraid to admit needed starting." Maya took her hand. "Then keep going. You don't need me anymore. You just need the faith that this is worth doing." Outside the hall, Charles waited. He handed her a cup of tea from a staff cart. She accepted it gratefully, taking a sip between words. "You were magnificent," he said. She shrugged lightly. I was just needed." "No," he insisted. "You did something else. You showed them what they already could feel, but didn't know how." She nodded. On the walk home through the gardens, the air cooler now, hands gripping the steaming cup, she thought about what she had said. About ripples and waves. About justice sometimes arriving not with a gavel or an office, but with a warm tea shared between two people in the dark. Later, in her small apartment, Maya sat at her desk and opened the leather notebook. She wrote, "I remember the day I drove not as a criminal, but as someone who wouldn't let fear dictate a child's fate. Now, I remember what it feels like to be witnessed, to be heard. Let that echo be louder than my fears." She paused, ran her fingers through her curls, then wrote on the next blank page, "I will teach them how to see." She closed the notebook and set it beside family photos and childhood mementos. It felt good there, nestled among memory and legacy, because now, her life had become more than survival. It had become a quiet force, one that moved the world not by breaking barriers, but by healing them. And in the deep hush of the night, Maya Williams slept peacefully for the first time in a long time, knowing she had finally found her voice. And more importantly, that someone was listening. The autumn dusk settled across the Grayson estate like a soft invitation. Candlelit paths winding through hedged gardens flickered in the encroaching dark. Inside the great house, most rooms were still occupied by staff wrapping up their duties for the evening. Maya lingered just inside the main foyer, the new leather notebook tucked in the crook of her arm. She had promised herself one quiet moment before returning home to unpack boxes for the educational center they were launching next week. And then she heard it, Elena's voice, small and trembling, echoing down the hallway. "Mama Maya, are you coming?" She rounded the grand staircase and found the child seated mid-carpet, blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders, a flashlight in hand. The corners of her room were dusky and giant, as if shadows were living creatures with breath. Maya knelt beside her and stroked her hair. "Tell me what you see." Elena's eyes flickered from the ceiling up to the chandelier. "Shadows at the edge," she whispered. "They look like people." She swallowed. "Like the ones who whispered in my dreams." Maya inhaled. She remembered the nightmares that had plagued the child right before the collapse, dark silhouettes at the foot of the bed, murmurs unfolding like secrets. But those visits had stopped once. Maya started sleeping in the room again. So seeing it now, after everything seemed settled, made her heart crack anew. "Would you like me to turn on the nightlight?" Maya offered. Elena nodded, pressing the flashlight into Maya's hand. "I'll be okay now, but I want you to stay for a while. Please." Maya switched the reading lamp on and settled beside her daughter, legs tucked under her. They read a story about stars and constellations, how each point of light represented a hope pinned in the sky. Elena's fingers traced star shapes in the margins, her eyelids drooping but her grip still strong. When the story ended, Elena whispered, "Promise you'll stay until I sleep?" Maya smiled and scooped the child into her arms. "Always." As she tucked Elena in, she noticed movement at the door. Charles Grayson stood framed in the doorway, silent, holding 2 cups of steaming chamomile tea. The steam curled in the lamplight like small prayers. She nodded, accepting the warmth between her hands. "You okay?" he asked, voice quiet. Maya hesitated. I didn't expect her to speak about the shadows again. He stood beside her quietly until she exhaled. "Nightmares take time to fade," he said gently. "She's safe now. We all owe that to you." Her throat tightened. I owe her a life. You gave it back, he said. And now, there's something else I'd like to ask. She looked at him curiously. She's going to need a school tutor while she's in recovery. I'd like you to choose someone. And once she's ready, choose the school too. If there's any way I can give you back what you gave us, this is it. Maya blinked. It wasn't a job, just a request. A position of respect and trust. She nodded, preparing words. But he continued. And I want to offer your apartment lease continued support. And get this, we're funding a new scholarship in your mother's name for nurses from your community. It's time the world saw your mother's legacy too. Tears pricked her eyes. Back home, her mother had carved out space in hospitals where no one expected her to belong. That legacy had shaped Maya's ideals in ways she hadn't fully understood until now. She accepted the tea. Thank you. Charles' regard softly shimmered. You're welcome. And, Maya? She looked at him. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. They sat in silence, the faint hum of the house around them, the distant chirp of crickets outside. Elena began to stir again, murmuring, Mama. And Maya lifted her up, gently guiding her back to sleep. Later, as they left the room, Charles turned the knob slowly. You belong, he said, softer than any vow. Here, in this house, in this family, in this story we're writing. Maya nodded, words gathering. She wanted to say she belonged in the world, but even saying that felt too vast for the quiet intimacy of that moment. So she simply replied, Thank you, again, meaning more than words carried. Days turned into weeks, and the foundation's quiet momentum spread into local neighborhoods. Maya was invited to speak at community centers, nursing schools, and municipal meetings. Her message was no longer merely about dignity and service work. It had evolved into a broader call for empathy, justice, and transformation in spaces where power often whispered instead of roared. At the ribbon cutting for the nurses' scholarship, Maya watched as young black women in crisp scrubs walked onto the podium with anticipation in their eyes. They were the first recipients, daughters, sisters, mothers with stories full of grit, dreams, and long hours in unpaid callings. When each received their certificate, the applause shook the hall with the resonance of overdue recognition. Maya stood at the back, watching through a haze of hope and memory. She remembered her mother's classroom, and the nights she ran hospital corridors waiting for paychecks to clear. And now, here she saw their faces reflected in those young nurses, faces that matched every stretch of kindness she'd ever dared to believe she carried forward. After the ceremony, a woman approached her. You changed my life, Miss Williams, she said. When I was the one cleaning your house, you treated me like a person. Like I meant something. And God. I forgot how much that mattered. Maya's eyes dampened. I treated you like you were always meant to matter. It wasn't a boast. It was the truth she had learned in dusk-lit kitchens and stormed corridors. That respect, once given, could spark something unstoppable. Later that evening, Maya returned to the gazebo by the pond. Charles found her there, rain starting to fall soft, indigo drops that pooled in her hair and shoulders. She closed her eyes and accepted the chill. Your healing places I never knew needed it, Charles said, sitting beside her. Not just within these walls, but in people who hadn't dared to set boundaries before your voice. She turned to him. We're still in the dark corners, but if even one of them gains light, I consider that enough. He nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. They remained together as the rain fell, the pond dark as glass. She rested her head on his shoulder, letting the quiet wash through her. The ripple she began at a hospital, the wave that formed through a foundation and a scholarship here, in dusk and rain, felt like a promise. That justice, once whispered, could become song, and that even the smallest flame like a maid who dared to steer could kindle a forest. In that moment, Maya Williams believed it fully. Weeks had slipped into months, but in the soft corners of the Grayson estate, the changes Maya had stirred were still unfolding as quietly and thoroughly as dawn. The Foundation's programs were meeting families in kitchens and community halls hundreds of miles away. But here, in the corridors and rooms that once echoed only with propriety, something new was growing. It was a Saturday morning when Maya made her usual rounds through the servant wing. She stopped at the window overlooking the rose garden, where a young assistant gardener paused mid-pruning to wave. She returned the wave and noticed something in his smile, a lift instead of a bow, a sign that the burdened posture had eased. In the kitchen, she shared coffee and words with the chef's recipes swapping like friendly currency, respectful laughter echoing off stainless steel counters. In the lounge, she found staff chatting openly over lunch, sharing dreams of further education and safer schedules. This wasn't revolution. It was the hush of dignity returning, bit by bit. The soundless bloom of mutual respect. Later that afternoon, the estate hosted a small welcome-back gathering for Elena. She'd been out of school for a while, recovering balance and confidence, the months of therapy having paid off. Tonight, she would return to her first piano recital. Maya sat in the front row of the small recital hall, her heart tight with anticipation and love. Charles sat beside her, glancing from her to the stage. No suit tonight, just a sweater and quiet pride lining his shoulders. At the piano, Elena wore a simple dress, her curls falling in soft waves. When she found them in the audience, her face lit up like sunrise. Elena's fingers danced across the keys in a classical piece she had practiced for weeks. Every note emerged steady, precise, gossamer, filling the space with a confidence that made Maya's chest ache. When the final chord faded, the audience rose in applause that felt more like a promise than celebration. Elena turned toward them, eyes bright and steady, gave a small nod, and then looked directly at Maya and Charles. After gathering his coat, Charles guided Elena down the aisle. She ran into Maya's arms first, then Charles embraced them both. The subtle shift in his expression, the one that spoke of understanding beyond words, wouldn't have been captured in any press release. But Maya saw it. The recognition that strength sometimes arrives inside the smallest hands. That night, as the staff cleaned the halls and shut windows against the dark, Maya made her way quietly through the servants' wing. She stopped at the door leading to her simple apartment. She looked in, shelves filled with books and pictures waiting for her to return home after each day. She paused there, as if listening to the quiet hum of possibility. A voice behind her. "Leaving so soon?" She turned to see Detective Coleman, standing in the soft glow of the hallway lamp, coat draped over one arm. "I had plans," Maya replied. Coleman stepped inside, crossing the threshold of the staff quarters like it belonged to her too. "I went to one of your public talks yesterday. A lot of doors opened." Maya tilted her head. "Thank you." Coleman nodded, pausing near the window. Outside, dark clouds were scattered near the horizon, stars fighting through. It's rare to see someone turn a crisis into a legacy. Maya ran her fingers over the necklace chain glimpsed beneath her blouse, a small locket with her mother's picture inside. "My mother did it. I'm just trying to remember her way." Coleman sighed. People respond when they feel seen instead of managed. You showed them that living with intent matters more than earning permission. Maya studied her friend's face in lamplight. "You always knew I wasn't just the help." Coleman smiled softly. "I wasn't the only one." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment that stretched with meaning. Then Maya turned and walked deeper into the apartment wing. "Good night, Detective," she said quietly. "Good night, Maya," Coleman replied. And in her tone, Maya heard affirmation not of her choices alone, but of the ripple those choices had created. That evening, back in her own home, Maya sat at the kitchen table with her leather notebook open. She wrote under lamplight, "I used to believe justice was delivered only by offices and courts. Now I know it can arrive through acts of care, through willingness to risk comfort for someone else's life. Through mercy, tempered by action." She paused, a whisper behind her. "Let me read that," Elena said, ghost, soft, walking into the room in her pajamas, blanket draped like a small cloak. Maya closed the notebook and scooped her up into her lap. "You're reading early." Elena yawned. "I can read now, Mama Maya. I want to read that part where you say justice can arrive through care." Maya smiled, tears born from tenderness and exhaustion. She held the words in her mind, as if committing them to memory, or maybe to promise. In the hush of night, the locket gleamed against her chest. Inside, her mother's image welcomed her. Maya pressed her finger gently against the glass and whispered, "We did this together, Mama." And as Elena drifted to sleep in her arms, Maya felt the world beyond the mansion settle into softer rhythms. The storms had passed, the ripples had become streams, and, beneath the same sky that held their stories, She finally allowed herself to believe it. That justice, in its purest form, is not delivered through fame or violence but through the sheer force of one human choosing love, again and again, until the world learns to follow. Spring returned to the Grayson estate like a confession. Blossoms unfolded across cherry trees, petals drifting onto the pathways like promises. Maya walked under the arching branches, the breeze carrying whispers of warmth and renewal. She paused beside the old rose garden once tended only by groundskeepers in borrowed shadows, and now vibrant with new life. It had become a place of quiet gatherings, soft retreats, even laughter. Elena skipped ahead, her school uniform neat and shoes polished, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from the clearing behind the estate. She held them out to Maya with a wide grin. "For the garden," she said. Maya knelt and accepted them, placing them in a small vase on a stone pedestal nearby. She touched each flower gently, remembering how fragile beginnings could still catalyze strength. They continued through the garden, arriving at a new bench under a magnolia tree. A brass plaque shone. "In honor of Maya Williams, who planted seeds of justice in every heart she found." Maya's breath caught. Charles stood behind her quietly. "I wanted to have this ready," he said softly. "The night before Elena's recital. I knew you deserved more." She swallowed emotionally, not used to such recognition. She finally said, "It feels surreal." "It's only because you make the impossible feel plain," he replied. Elena ran forward and back, jumping into Maya's arms. "Watch me," she said, pulling out a battered soccer ball. She dribbled and kicked it toward a small net that had appeared at the edge of the garden, a gift from Charles to encourage outdoor play. Elena's laughter bounced off the trunks of the trees, full and bright. Maya watched not as maid or shadow, but as mother and protector. She hadn't anticipated the depth of this shift, but in Elena's eyes, she saw it. Later, Maya returned to her role in the Foundation's weekly sessions. This week's seminar was about honoring the labor often unseen. She led talk with her notebook open, reading from her own experiences lived instead of just remembered. "Justice," she said, "is what we get when we lift the veil of silence." The group nodded. Shared stories, shared nods, shared resolve. Afterward, a woman approached an estate manager from outside, her eyes bright. "You saved me tonight," she whispered. "I told them to listen. They did." Maya squeezed her hand. "We save each other." That evening, Maya returned to the staff lounge. Plates of leftover supper from the estate's catering event were laid out: sandwiches, fruit bowls, oatmeal cookies. A few staff lingered, chatting about vacations they planned, or children's tests. Maya poured herself tea and sat with them. They told jokes she hadn't heard in years. She laughed at each one, letting the silence between stories feel warm. Dignity had returned to each corner of these halls. Then came the mail, a thin envelope stamped with municipal letterhead. Maya unsealed it. Inside was a single certificate. City of West Haven Award of Civic Courage, presented to Maya Williams for extraordinary humanity and leadership that changed an entire community. Her breath caught. Tears blurred her vision. She looked down at the staff around her. They stood silent, not stifled, but expectant, proud. The older butler cleared his throat quietly. They meant it when they said recognition was coming. Maya swallowed hard and stood. She accepted applause from the group, soft, sincere, unforced. Her voice trembled but held steady. I share this with you. For every unseen act, every whispered request, every time you stood for someone else." The staff returned to their tables, quieter now, but with light in their eyes. Maya returned to the window, gazing at the mansion beyond, no longer distant or forbidding. Late that night, in the office of the Foundation, Maya sat across from a young intern, an inner-city youth named Janice. Her hands shook as she fumbled a scholarship application draft. Maya offered steady guidance, reassuring nods, and gentle feedback. Janice exhaled with relief. "Thank you," she said. "You make me feel possible." Maya smiled, thinking of her own childhood, her mother waiting for night shifts to end, her own path switching from nursing school to cleaning floors, then back into advocacy and care. She sounded Janice's potential echoing in her voice. At home later, Maya tucked Elena into bed. The girl looked at her with sleepy certainty. "You're amazing," she whispered. "The world knows now." Maya kissed her forehead. I want it to matter more than the world knowing. I want it to mean something. Elena drifted off. Maya left the room and leaned against the slightly ajar door. She peeked into the dark hall, one statue in a grand house, yes, but now erected by citizens of a city that once wouldn't have seen her at all. Her strength had become woven into their language of hope. In the foyer, the leather notebook lay open on the table. Maya crossed the threshold into the quiet of her living room. She wrote one more line in the margins of the last page. Justice blooms where compassion is sown. And then she closed it. Outside, the magnolia petals drifted down in silver moonlight, soft as absolution. The house exhaled around her, no longer a symbol of control, but of transformation. And in that hush, she dared to believe not only in justice but in the gentle power behind it. The estate was finally breathing again. The first sliver of dawn spread across the Grayson estate, turning the dewy grass into crowns of diamond light. Maya paused at the threshold of the kitchen entrance, inhaling the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon buns. It was Easter Sunday, and the staff had gathered quietly in the servants' wing lounge, their faces hopeful, expectant. Outside, the magnolia tree in the courtyard was in full bloom, its petals quivering in the gentle spring breeze like notes waiting to be sung. Maya entered, collecting her mug of coffee. A hush fell, not out of deference, but reverence. Behind her, the staff, some younger, some older, formed a loose semicircle. In the center stood Carlos, the veteran butler. His silvered hair caught the golden light from the eastward windows, and his posture held the weight of years lived in service, dignity maintained in adversity. He cleared his throat gently, eyes sweeping the room. "Today," he began, "we invited the community choir inside the wings. We want them to sing for the children, for Elena and for us." He looked at Maya. "They asked that you open." Maya felt her breath catch. A choir in this room, for us. It was more than recognition. It was belonging. She nodded softly. "Yes, a choir cannot just sing. It must be heard. Not through glass, not through layers of prestige. Here where people sweat, cry, laugh, breathe, it must be heard." Carlos smiled, a soft quiver in his chest. He gestured toward the back door. Outside, in the courtyard, men and women stood with music folders and trembling smiles. When they saw Maya step from the lounge, they began warming their voices in gentle hums. The petals rustled, as if urging them forward. Elena, ushered in by the elderly nurse Ruth, sat at a small bench in the front row, clutching the same bouquet of wildflowers she'd once brought in spring. Her eyes were radiant, brimming with pride and love. Maya approached the choir. Her throat was thick with emotion, but she spoke clearly. "Sing with us," she said. "Sing to us. We've spent too long keeping stories in the dark. Today, let every note carry truth." And then, before her astonishment could settle, the choir began. Their voices rose across the courtyard, weaving through magnolia branches and arched windows with a song she recognized deep in her bones. Lift every voice and sing. It wasn't just melody, it was reclaiming. Each word a step toward healing wounds that never fully scarred. Maya watched as the staff members listened, eyes glossy. Chefs paused mid-chop. Drivers slowed their routines. Gardeners leaned on shovels, heads bowed, not in shame but in reverence. Music swelled, rising higher. Each voice found unity in the chorus. Even the magnolia petals seemed to vibrate with sound, as the final line hung in the air soft, lingering. That hush returned. This time, though, the silence was settlement, of recognition, of offering. Then the applause began. Not thunderous but crisp, honest. It came from the hearts of people whose labor was once ignored. And one by one, station by station, they applauded themselves as much as the choir, as though each clap affirmed, "I matter." Later that evening, during the estate's Easter dinner, Maya sat with Charles and Elena near the head of the table. Across from them sat Carlos and Ruth, the chef and the night nurse, symbols of so many roles that went uncelebrated. Charles raised his glass. "To Maya," he said simply. "May her voice continue to ripple until it becomes a wave wide enough to carry us all." He clinked his glass gently, words murmured but meaningful. Maya felt Elena squeeze her hand. She looked at Charles, his gaze steady and kind, then at the staff in the room, some laughing softly, some eyes shining with unshed tears. This was not just an Easter dinner. This was a home reclaimed. Afterward, Maya slipped outside into the magnolia courtyard. The petals had faded slightly, but remained fragrant. Tomorrow, they'd fall. She bent to pick one up soft as memory, and pressed it between the pages of her leather notebook beneath a ribbon flap. Lift every voice, she wrote beneath it, in neat, confident script. She closed the notebook and walked toward the back of the garden, where the small soccer goal still stood beside the budding rose bushes. Elena was there, practicing slow kicks with a gentle smile. Maya watched for a while before stepping into the twilight. Later, back in the quiet of their bedroom, Maya tucked Elena into bed. The child's gaze was bright with sleep. "Mama Maya?" she whispered. "Yes, sweet girl. Will they remember us?" Maya brushed her curls. "They're remembering already." She kissed her forehead. "Rest now." Elena exhaled softly and drifted into quiet sleep. Maya sat by the window a moment longer, looking at the dark sky dotted with distant stars. Above her, the choir's notes echoed faintly like an anthem in the night, proof that when a person once invisible finds voice, the measure of justice cannot be contained inside walls. In that hush, she realized the choir's song had already carried beyond the estate. It echoed inside the hearts of the people she had touched, and inside her own, too. And in that gentle affirmation, Maya finally knew. Justice had arrived not with judgment, but with song. The late morning sun settled into the Grayson garden with grace, its warmth coaxing morning glories to open, and inviting the scent of jasmine into the courtyard. Maya sat at the rose garden bench beneath the magnolia, her leather notebook open on her lap. She ran her finger along the phrase she'd written beneath the pressed petals. "Lift every voice." It felt uncanny to reflect on the anthem's journey across time, written in 1899 by James Weldon Johnson and set to music by his brother J. Rosamond Johnson, as a prayer of resilience and freedom, a hymn that thousands would come to know as the Black National Anthem. She paused at the memory of the staff's Easter choir lifting that anthem across the courtyard, their voices circling overhead like hope. It was more than sound, it was reclamation. The lyric line, "Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies," felt like a promise fulfilled. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Elena approach, carrying a small notebook and pencil. She leaned against her knee, looking into the old pages gently. "Mama Maya, will you read my poem to the choir tomorrow?" Maya smiled, heart light. "I'd be honored." Few estates in America had felt such a sacred shift. The mansion's walls held a new clarity now. Upstairs, nurses quietly checked hand charts, speaking with each other by first name. In the servants' lounge, managers asked permission before changing shifts. In the courtyard, the old rose garden was no longer an ornamental afterthought. It was a sanctuary of stories. That afternoon, Maya, journalist Leah Gray, and a few community members convened in the foundation's new gallery room. On the walls were framed photographs of women whose names had once been whispered in the margins. Hattie, Maria, Claudine, linked by quiet courage. Today, they would hand off each framed portrait to a woman's family member. Each family entered with tears in their eyes, each pass holding generations of unspoken honor. When it came to the final portrait, the one of Rosa, whose daughter had flown in from Georgia, Maya paused. The daughter looked up, eyes weary from travel. Maya took the frame in her hands and their eyes met. "Your mother often said," Maya said softly into the quiet space, "if they can't see us, we will show them our dignity. I see her today." She handed the photograph to the daughter, who held it close to her chest before turning to hug Maya. Outside the gallery window stood Charles, watching. When the woman emerged with her portrait cradled like a child, she nodded at him. His expression was gentle, humble. Witnessing dignity being restored felt unfamiliar but right. That evening, the staff stood in the servant corridor, not lined straight, but shoulder by shoulder. They waited. At the head stairwell, Maya and Charles emerged. Behind them came a small brass quintet, 4 players in dark suits, a trombonist in evening wear. They lifted their instruments to their lips. This time, there was no choir, but the first notes of "Lift every voice and sing" rose out of warm brass. Golden notes twined through murals of magnolias and framed portraits, past kitchen windows, into the open sky. The anthem, precise, reverent, transcendent, held every step of sorrow and triumph stitched into its melody. Wikipedia time. Staff watched with hands clasped. Some lips trembled. Some bowed their heads. No voice had joined the brass, but the anthem needed no words here. It needed presence. It carried the years of crowded kitchens, long nights, unseen tears, and countless acts of uncredited compassion. It held their truth. When the last note lingered in the courtyard's hush, Maya stepped forward. She opened her mouth, but the words caught. Instead, she offered her hand to Carlos, the old butler. For once, she was not above him. She was beside him. She spoke softly. "We made it possible." Carlos took her hand and spoke back. "You lifted us all." Later, back in the dim peace of her apartment, Maya closed her leather notebook and placed a pressed magnolia petal between its pages. She flipped to a page full of her own writing. "This song taught me that healing doesn't need roar. It needs breath. It needs witness. And so I ask not for applause but permission, that every forgotten voice be raised until the world listens." She reached for her pen, and beneath the anthem verses, she added, "I hear you." At that moment, Elena entered, eyes sleepy but bright. "Mama, will you tell me again how it began?" she asked. Maya smiled and tucked her daughter into bed. She spoke of the two brothers who had written a hymn born out of struggle and hope, of schoolchildren singing it in Jacksonville in 1900, of how it traveled from churches to protests, from graduations to inaugurations as a pulse of identity and defiance. Elena listened intently, and tonight, Maya whispered, "It was lifted in our own courtyard, not by choir but in brass and heart. And that means it belongs to everyone." Elena nodded, eyes dreamy. "Good. I like that." Maya kissed her forehead. "Sleep, my little song." Left in the hush of the room, Maya exhaled, knowing the echoes her life had begun to carry were more lasting than any stone monument. Justice had arrived not as a courtroom verdict, but as a song rising from the low places, and it was only just beginning to echo. It was after midnight when the call came. Maya had already laid Elena to sleep and returned to her leather-bound notebook, carefully placing the magnolia petal inside. Her eyes stung with tiredness, but something about the unexpected ring of the phone made her sit up. She glanced at the screen, Detective Coleman's name. "May I come by?" Coleman's voice crackled softly through the line. "There's something I think you should see." The precinct was quiet at this hour. Maya entered the secure doors and was led down a silent hallway. Coleman waited behind a glass partition outside what looked like a small archive room. She opened the door with a key and turned on the lamp inside. "There's something we found in the case file," Coleman said, flipping open a manila folder. Maya stepped closer, drawn by curiosity. Coleman sorted through pages until she held out a yellowed photograph. Neo-sepia tones showed a much younger Charles Grayson with his late wife, Rachel. In one photograph, he knelt beside a small girl who looked like a young Maya, dark curls, a shy smile holding a toddler's hand. Rachel's hand rested on Charles's shoulder, gentle yet rooted. Maya's breath caught. The picture seemed to hum with memory. "That's you," Coleman said softly. Maya's lips parted, her eyes absorbing every detail. "He called her one of his favorites," Coleman continued, checking the notes. "He mentored her. Eventually, your family moved away, but he never forgot." Maya stared at the photo, feeling the ghost of kindness thread between the generations. After a long moment, Coleman spoke more quietly. "That kindness, it shaped you in ways you carry still." The silence settled deeply around them, filled with unspoken understanding. Maya closed her eyes. The pain, the resentment, the burden she thought she'd shed, it all seemed to fall away at that moment. Maybe it had never been his complete failure. Maybe parts of him were kind once. And kindness, once planted, can grow even after storms. Coleman's gentle voice pulled her back. "I'm glad I called." Maya opened her eyes. "Thank you for this." The next morning dawned pale and golden. Maya found Charles in the magnolia garden, reading quietly on the corner bench. Elena had gone off with the gardener, collecting wildflowers. Maya approached, holding the old photograph tucked beneath her arm. He looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "I found something last night," Maya said, producing the image. Charles's eyes softened when he saw it. He swallowed past memory. "That was her favorite student. She took an interest because she said you were a bright child in a sea of anonymity." Maya nodded. "I never forgot." even though I thought I'd forgotten everything there. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. I wish I had found you sooner. Maya offered a small, forgiving smile. No one found me sooner, Charles. I found myself here. He nodded, expression solemn. And thank goodness you did. A week later, the foundation hosted its first annual leadership summit, inviting domestic workers, advocates, faith leaders, and community organizers from across the region. Maya opened the summit with a story. I once believed people were shaped only by their triumph or their station. But I learned something different. People are shaped by being seen, by acts of remembrance, by what we choose to carry forward. It's why I started carving photographs into our walls. It's why I accepted a seat at the table and why I offer you mine now. As she spoke, she grabbed the image from her lap and held it before the crowd. This photograph didn't come into my life by accident. It came because someone cared. Then she laid it atop a display table already lined with framed photos and notebooks, stories, poems, interviews, memories of people who had served others in grace and strength. A hush fell in the hall before applause bloomed warm, deliberate, hopeful. In the back of the room, Charles watched his chest quiet, his eyes grateful. After the summit, Maya and Charles walked the old magnolia path. The ground was carpeted with petals. The air smelled of blossoms. Charles spoke first. You were invisible once, not because you were lesser, but because no one made room for you. Maya glanced at him quietly. Will you trust me to carry Rachel's legacy forward, through every step you take? She felt the weight and wonder in the offer. She met his gaze deliberately. Yes, she said softly, not for her, not for the picture, but because what started here deserves to keep growing. He draped an arm around her shoulders as they walked. That night, Maya sat at the window where the magnolia branches reached into the sky. Stars drifted above like fallen petals, pinpricks of distant clarity. Elena slept softly beside her blanket curled around her, face unlined by worry. Maya pulled out her notebook. She wrote, "Kindness once given can sew wounds that time alone cannot heal. It can sit in memory, waiting until the moment arrives when we're ready to receive and ready to return it, and that moment can become a constellation." She pressed her lips against Elena's forehead. From shadows, we have risen not because we demanded to be seen, but because we remembered how to be kind. Maya closed the notebook, the photograph beside it, pressed petals between pages. She exhaled a long breath. The justice she had begun to weave was no longer silent. It glimmered in brass voices, candlelit faces, and the eyes of a little girl who believed she was worth saving. Under magnolia and stars and in the hush of a new kind of dawn, it felt real. And it was only just beginning. Autumn filtered back into the Grayson estate with quiet persistence. The magnolia trees once again bowed with buds not yet bloomed, promising another cycle of renewal. Maya stood at the edge of the courtyard where the garden's petals had once danced. Now, a small stone path led from the rose garden out into the community, a sidewalk created last spring in collaboration with local neighbors. It was more than landscape. It was a living bridge. Elena trailed behind her, clutching a basket of fallen chestnuts. She wore her school sweater and sneakers scuffed from play. Maya watched her collect each nut carefully, as though gathering stars. When she slipped one into Maya's palm, she said, "This is ours, Mama Maya, a promise." Maya nodded and slipped the chestnut into her coat pocket. A promise, yes, and the weight of what they carried now extended beyond estate borders. Inside the foundation's annex, Maya prepared for a keynote address. Tonight, she would speak at West Haven University, a local gathering of educators, activists, and civic leaders who had invited her to discuss dignity and justice in invisible work. On a side table sat her notebook, now bulging with notes and sketches, a constellation of ideas. Next to it was the photograph of young Maya with Charles and Rachel, softly lit by a single lamp. Beneath the photo, a framed quote from James Baldwin's Open House. "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Her heartbeat thumped gently in her throat, but she took a breath, remembering every step: the hospital drive, the choir song, the scholarships, the petals in notebooks. Elena led the way from the car, tugging Maya by the hand. "You'll do great," she whispered. Maya smiled. "Only because of you." Inside the auditorium, the audience sat in rows of school colors, white shirts and navy ties. At the front table, the mayor offered a warm nod as she took the podium. The projector displayed the foundation's emblem, a magnolia plant intertwined with a pair of open hands. Maya stepped up. The first slide showed a single chestnut. Promises gathered in darkness can become the seeds of change. Oh, she spoke steadily. Every chestnut begins hidden, buried beneath leaf litter, overlooked by the sun. But given warmth and care, it cracks open into a tree that can offer shade. That's how justice works, not always in courtrooms or headlines, but in quiet acts that ripple outward. She paused as the audience absorbed the metaphor. Today, I stand before you not as a maid, not as a caretaker, but as someone who learned that listening is action, and visibility is a form of power. When a young black girl collapsed in my arms, I drove a Ferrari through red lights, but I carried something more fragile than that. I carried her life. Faces softened, eyes widened, a hush descended like clarity, but I also carried the weight of not being seen, of being the help. And so, when I stood before you, I came with more than credentials. My story stood with me. And it demanded truth. She clicked the slide. Photographs of domestic workers in other households, their faces captured in candid smiles. Underneath each, not invisible, not replaceable. You are here tonight because someone believed you'd matter, instituted a scholarship, changed a policy, let someone bring voice here. Pause. Injustice is loud when denied, but justice is lasting when acknowledged. The audience murmured. A few nodded. A professor in the front row dabbed at her eyes. Afterward, questions came about fund structures, policy recommendations, community partnerships. Maya spoke with authenticity, not theoretical, but forged through lived experience. They asked, "How do you rebuild trust?" She said, "By following actions with accountability. When hurt is real, apology must be real and systems must change." When the session ended, people gathered around. A labor historian offered to co-author a paper. A dean asked to host a symposium. A local councilwoman shook her hand, promising support to expand the foundation's reach into rural counties. Maya left the hall, filled her voice no longer just hers, but a mirror for many. At home, she found Charles on the patio bench beside the magnolia tree. He looked older in the flickering lantern light, but stronger. "You were magnificent," he said. Maya shook her head. "It wasn't me, it was us." He smiled faintly. "You gave others permission to claim space. That's profound." They sat together under the branches. Elena asked if I'd plant more chestnut trees, Maya said. "Good idea," Charles replied. "We'll plan that. On the path out every few feet, a tree, so children walking home from school see them. And remember, even buried things can grow." Maya glanced at him. "You're trying." He nodded. "I'm trying. Because someone once showed me what kindness could do when I didn't expect to see it again." She reached for his hand. It felt rooted. Later that night, as Elena slept between them, Maya pulled the notebook from the drawer. Chestnut-pocketed pages stood open. She began writing. "Injustice looks like silence. Justice sounds like song, and it tastes like chestnuts gathered with care. It smells like magnolia and ministry. Every act of visibility, every recognition of labor, becomes a constellation we can steer by. And tonight, we begin planting seed trees along the path, so no child walks home without knowing where they come from." She pressed the pen to leather cover and closed it. At the window, the magnolia branches glowed under street lamps. Leaves drifted softly like petals falling into quiet water. Outside, the path was visible now, lined with stones and budding chestnut trees. Elena murmured, half asleep, "Mama?" "Yes?" "I want to be a gardener for your trees." Maya smiled, breath-catching. "Then come, gardener," she whispered, "because this path is ours." And as she turned off the lamp, the magnolia petals glimmered against the window pane. In that hush, she believed fully, constellations are created not only by light, but by those who remember to plant. Nebulous dawn light slipped across the Grayson estate one more time, spring ragged at the edges of summer. Maya stood at the crest of the new chestnut-lined path, shade trees aloft like sentinels of promise. Children from the neighborhood gathered at its edge, some in school uniforms, others in play clothes waiting for the first planting of the season. Among them, Elena held Maya's hand, her smile a sunrise of confidence. Maya turned, taking in the scene, families, staff, volunteers, and neighbors who had once been invisible now united. Charles stood beside her, sleeves rolled up, hands ready for dirt. The crowd hushed as she stepped forward. Elena asked me to plant this seed for you all, Maya began, voice steady but tender. She handed the shovel to her daughter, who knelt at the prepared hole in the ground. This chestnut tree isn't just a tree. It's a promise of growth, rooted in our courage to care. Elena pressed the seed into soil softened with compost. She patted it gently, then looked up at Maya, glowing with wonder. Other children followed, each placing a seed. Chestnuts carried in small baskets by staff and community members, each offering a symbol of belonging. Maya watched the seeds buried, how they settled into earth as if awakening. How the path beneath them promised direction. And around her, people clapped in quiet blessing, not for spectacle but for life given room to flourish. When the last seed was placed, Maya took the shovel back. She wiped her hands on her jeans, noticing the fine grain of earth clinging like memory. Charles handed her a cup of iced tea. She sipped, tasting sunlight. A neighbor approached an elderly woman who had once served at the estate decades ago. Her apron had long ago retired, but her eyes were still strong. She offered Maya a jar of honey she'd made, to nourish what's growing. Maya accepted with tears she'd been saving for justice. The gathering drifted into shared picnic blankets in the rose garden. Children ran weaving between chestnut saplings. Adults spoke softly about scholarships, training programs, and safe schedules. The staff laughed around steaming cups of coffee, camera-free, expectation-free. Here, dignity was just being, no proclamation necessary. Maya slipped away to the foundation office for a moment. She pulled the framed photograph of herself with young Charles and Rachel from the shelf. Below it read, "You were seen, now see others." She traced the words with her finger, then replaced it gently and returned to the garden. As afternoon light softened, Charles joined her beneath the magnolia where the plaque bore her name. They stood in peaceful silence until Elena ran up, eyes bright. "Mama Maya, look," she pointed to a shoot, thin and eager, rising beside one of the newly planted saplings. "It's growing," Elena whispered, "just like us." Maya knelt to brush Elena's hair. "Yes, baby, we're growing too." Charles smiled quietly, watching. "Because you gave them permission." She looked up. "Because they mattered." Night came quietly, a velvet hush across the estate. Maya stepped into the living room, carrying her notebook and a single chestnut. She placed both on the coffee table. She flipped open to the final blank page and wrote, "We planted tonight not just seeds but invitations for tomorrow's justice. May each future blossom remind us that seeing one another is the truest way to grow." She closed the notebook, heart calm. In the bedroom, Maya tucked Elena into bed once more. The child's eyes were soft with dreams. "Mama?" "Yes? Will we come back here when the trees are tall?" Maya pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every spring, until we're too old to bend down anymore." Elena smiled, drifting to sleep. Maya stayed in the doorway for a long minute, gaze drifting upward to the magnolia branches swaying outside in moonlight. Petals shimmered like stars caught in wind. She breathed in the promise of summer, of growth. She turned off the lamp. Later, Maya sat at her desk by the window. City lights gleamed beyond trees. She placed the chestnut beside her pen. She wrote finally, "Sometimes, justice finds us not in courthouses, but in courtyards. It blooms through lullabies and driving through red lights when no one else can. It rises in brass fanfare and staff laughter at dawn. Tonight, as a child plants a seed under my name, I believe more deeply than ever that justice is not carved in stone, it is sown in soil, tended by hands brave enough to believe in tomorrow." She closed the notebook, pressing her palms to the grain of the cover, as if embracing a promise made whole. In the silence of the night, the estate slept beneath magnolias and chestnut buds, each growing slowly toward the sun, each carrying a quiet echo of light beyond the estate into every heart that had dared to look and been seen.